Because like when you start learning about systems, everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
Everything is sexist, everything's offensive to people like me. Let's go through the checklist, it's all misogyny. Everything is sexist when you break the dead. Doesn't matter how absurd, desperate, forget about merits. We're oppressed every day, what you say, it's a white supremacy. Everything is sexist, everything's a gender conspiracy. Everything is sexist, it's the patriarchy. Everything is sexist, everything's a part of the patriarchy. Everything is sexist, it's all misogyny.
Critical cartographers have studied maps for years and years, and they find they're socially constructed, right, and expressions of power. That historically maps have been used to colonize and conquer and are primarily created by white men. Those who engage in critical cartography are interested to use maps for different purposes, to show the alternative viewpoints. Counter-cartographers seek to use maps to tell these different stories of the oppressed, focusing on topics such as social deprivation, poverty, and hunger. Community geography is influenced by radical geographers such as Bill Bungay. And Bill Bungay is one of my heroes. He was a geographer who worked primarily in the 1960s and 70s in the Detroit area with members of the community, mostly youth in the inner city, to produce maps that sought to expose social and racial injustices. This is one of the maps that students working with Bill Bungay created in the 1970s. And if you can't see the label, it says, "Where commuters run over black children on the Point's downtown track." So he used maps to shock and to tell different stories, to tell the story of those who have been oppressed and marginalized in society.
The local has endorsed this rally and has endorsed certainly and will join the U of T Coalition Against Sexism. In terms of the unpaid work, I mean, we're not even talking about the unpaid work that women, primarily women do in society, childcare, healthcare, family care.
Women hold up half the sky. Women hold up half the sky. Women hold up half the sky. Women hold up half the sky.
Warren Farrell!
Fuck Warren Farrell! Fuck Warren Farrell! Fuck Warren Farrell! Fuck Warren Farrell! Fuck Warren Farrell!
And like these so-called men's rights groups are actually hate groups.
No hate speech on campus! No hate speech on campus! No hate speech on campus! No. Yes, it would be rape. Sorry.
That would be rape.
That would be rape.
No, no,
Hey,
no violence.
Jesus. Big man, bring him It used to be called.
Sir, just stand at the back.
It's now called registered.
That's fine.
Just called
But right now, there's a temporary delay. Okay? Trying to get sorted out.
He also, one of his famous quotes, he called date rape exciting, which is just horrible and misogynistic. There's nothing exciting or fun about rape. Rape is horrible, and we don't tolerate that sort of thought at U of T. Okay. I came as part of my women's studies.
Talk to
We're not super interested in talking to you, first of all, but basically we're here to shut down an event that is promoting the patriarchy.
You're doing it really well. Good job.
Very frustrated. I was studying all today, and I took time out of my studies to
I'm not sufficiently convinced that I'll receive an answer that isn't what I've presented.
2 of my friends committed suicide, and I want the peace of understanding why that happened.
Wow. When did this happen?
It happened about 2 years ago. It was one after the other, like that.
Did you expect to get some addressing of suicide issue at the talk here?
Yes, I did.
What I have to ask on that, and I'll ask you, is why this space to talk about that? Like feminism, for example, offers lots of spaces to talk about mental health issues, talk about depression, both in men, women, and people who don't identify within the binary.
I think everybody's voice should be heard. I wondered why the security was trying to keep me back, and I think it's for my own safety.
This is what men's rights look like! This is what men's rights look like! This is what men's rights look like! This is what men's rights look like!
They're fucking scum! Fuck you! They're fucking pigs! How do you sleep at night, man? You fuckers!
So you believe it's hate speech, right?
It is hate speech.
I've never heard him before. I don't even know what he's talking. I've never heard of him before.
We invite you to educate
I just
yourself.
so I just wanted to listen to
Go on
him.
Google.
I just wanted to see who this guy is and what he's talking about. But now I can't get him.
You should be fucking ashamed of yourself. You're fucking scum. You are fucking scum. Fucking rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating, fucking scum.
Is there someone else I can wait to see one follow me?
Fucking scum. Yeah, just another.
I just want to listen to someone else's opinion. I'm not even on a side here. I just listen to as many people as I can.
You know what though? Why would you pay money to fucking support a fucking rape apologist if you weren't fucking one?
I never heard him say anything that was.
Well, it's fucking scum.
You have a ticket?
Yeah, you should be fucking proud of yourself. These are the fucking men that are going to rape your sisters and the women in your life. You should be fucking ashamed.
This meeting seems to confirm many aspects of Jordan Peterson's evaluation of the problem of social justice activists in universities, acting as a distinct political faction, organising and promoting social justice.
And I've had 3 clients who I would say have been, we'll say, harassed, I suppose is the right way of putting it.
On social media or otherwise?
No, at work, by people who don't like their political opinions, essentially.
In the past 2 years, we have seen teachers and professors who are heavily invested in social justice advocacy acting inappropriately by organising their students into political gangs to bully and harass students, faculty and speakers on campuses. In 2015, student protests erupted across the United States to protest a range of social justice issues. After given faulty statistics on the prevalence of rape on college campuses and numerous false reports of racism and the Ku Klux Klan, these students were incited by professors such as Melissa Click.
To walk forward, isn't it? I believe it's my right to walk forward.
Hi, media. Can I talk to you?
No, you need to get out. You need to get out.
No, I don't.
You need to get out.
I actually don't.
All right. Hey, who wants to help me get this reporter out of here? I need some muscle over here.
During the protests, Click bullied a student journalist called Mark Schreierbecker, now Kayla Schreierbecker, because Schreierbecker had the audacity to film her activities during the protest. The video of Click calling for Muscle to physically remove Schreierbecker went viral, and the student protests expanded across the country in the Stand with Mizzou demonstrations. The students at Smith College even had a vow of loyalty to social justice that journalists were required to take if they wanted to be allowed to cover the events. Click was suspended for her actions, and her student followers described her as a civil rights martyr, protesting against the university in support.
Melissa Click. I stand with Melissa Click because she found the protection of the students more important than a paycheck.
I stand with Melissa Click because she knows that just because the media has to make a deadline doesn't mean that they can disrespect stories, narratives, and communities.
And human beings.
You.
See that on YouTube. I stand with Melissa Click because she tried to give us our human right to privacy when it was violated.
I stand with Melissa Click because she understands how the First Amendment works.
I stand with Melissa Click because, unlike that reporter, she has respect for us.
This culminated in the president of Missouri University being forced to step down. Shortly after this, a new protest erupted at Yale after Nicholas Christakis, the master of Silliman College, refused to prohibit students from wearing Halloween costumes that the social justice advocates deemed as problematic. The students surrounded and berated Christakis for his commitment to freedom of expression in another video that went viral.
The exception is because other people have rights too, not just you.
Walk away. Walk away. He doesn't deserve to be listened to. He doesn't deserve to be listened to.
An unsafe space here for all. Be
deny-
quiet. For all Silliman students. You understand that? As your position as master, it is your job to create a place of comfort and home for the students that live in Silliman. You have not done that. By sending out that email, that goes against your position as master. Do you understand that? Then
No, I don't agree with that.
Then why the fuck did you accept the position?
Because
Who
I have
the
a
fuck hired you?
I have a different
You
vision
should
than you.
step down. If that is what you think about being a master, you should step down. It is not about creating an intellectual space. It is not. Do you understand that? It's about creating a home here. You are not doing that.
You're supposed to be our advocate.
You should be at the event last night when you hear her Franco say that she doesn't know how to create a safe space for her freshmen in Silliman. How do you explain that? These freshmen come here, they think this is what Yale is? Do you hear that? They're gonna leave, they're gonna transfer because you are a poor steward of the community. You should not sleep at night.
We're out. We out.
You are disgusting.
Christakis later resigned as master of Silliman due to the protests. The outrage of social justice activists was inflamed when Milo Yiannopoulos announced a campus speaking tour throughout 2016, in which he was regularly interrupted by militant activists accusing him of harbouring all manner of bigotries. These activists repeatedly tried to prevent Yiannopoulos from exercising his right to freedom of speech and the students' right to hear what he had to say.
The audience could please remain sitting and quiet. That would be great.
This is a very low standard of protest. At Rutgers, they at least brought paint. You know, I worked out why there's so many black girls here. I think it's because I fucked their brothers.
Audience, please remain sitting. Audience, please remain sitting.
He's an idiot!
Audience, please, Brendan Sonamaker, please sit down.
When Milo was scheduled to speak in February 2016 at UC Berkeley, the home of the free speech movement in the 1960s, a massive crowd of thousands of Black Bloc Antifa protesters caused the event to be cancelled through violence. The riots caused tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage to the university campus. After they had attempted to storm the building, Milo was evacuated by the police. Protesters said, "We won't put up with the violent rhetoric of Milo, Trump, or the fascistic alt-right, and that they were willing to resist by any means necessary." Again at Berkeley, in April 2017, at a violent confrontation between left-wing protesters and pro-Trump protesters, a young man was assaulted by an Antifa member with a bike lock.
You go! I'm filming you. Oh, I'm gonna hurt you. Because you have a mask on. Oh, shit.
Oh! You motherfucker! Oh shit, he's bleeding. Yo! Hey, medic! He's bleeding!
By tracking the attacker using video footage taken from multiple angles, the black-clad Antifa protester was identified by users of the infamous website 4chan. The attacker was a man called Eric Clanton, an ethics professor at Diablo Valley College, Clanton was arrested and charged on 4 counts of assault with a deadly weapon and 1 count of wearing a mask. In June of 2017, another incident went viral as Professor Brett Weinstein of Evergreen State College refused the demands of social justice activists to be removed from the campus for their planned Day of Absence, where white people would be required to leave the college campus. The students protested against Weinstein directly.
Are any of you willing to have a discussion?
We're trying to right now! You're not listening!
Involves listening on my part and also...
You're not listening!
There is a difference between debate and dialectic. Debate, wait a second. No, it is. Debate means you are trying to win. Dialectic means you are using disagreement to discover what is true. I am not interested in debate. I'm interested only in dialectic, which does mean I listen to you and you listen to me.
Nah, but like, white people listen to all the fucking time. You're on our time.
It's all about it. On terms of white privilege. This is not a discussion. You have lost that right.
I am talking about terms that serve the truth. Those are the terms I want.
Let's talk about it.
We come here as students against campus racism and against anti-blackness on campus. And we would like to reach out to the students of color, the humanities, as well as the sciences that we are here to support. And we want to dismantle anti-blackness and confine. We want to give some sense of solidarity and provide safety and outcome.
Will you listen to me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, not maybe. Please.
No, if you decide to stop.
Go!
Okay.
We lived racism. We don't have to study it to understand it. We live it every
And the
day.
issue is you think scientific proves everything. What about all the racist scientific
You're
theories
trying
they
to
had about black
dismantle
people for
programs
so
for
long?
us.
Explain that. What's your scientific? No.
It is not your
Listen. You're going to listen.
You asked me a question. I would like to answer.
Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
Brett Weinstein's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
Brett Weinstein's got to go!
This led to a siege at Evergreen, in which the student protesters took the president of the college hostage until their demands were met, even regulating when the president, George Bridges, was able to use the bathroom.
Black power! Black power! Black power!
People do it.
Put your hand down. That's my problem, George. You keep doing these.
What about our protection right now? Fuck you and fuck the police! Whiteness is the most violent fucking system to ever breathe!
Get out. You're not helpful. Get out.
Can you listen to your shirt?
Get out.
Shake and chill. You need to go.
You better not shut the fuck up. No, you shut the fuck up. No.
I think what's smart is not to I think what's smart is not to tone police people.
And so I'm telling you, you're speaking to your ancestors. All right? We've been here before you. We built these cities.
Right.
We've had civilization way before you ever had.
Right.
Coming out your caves.
Hey, don't do that.
Watch yourself.
That's not appropriate. You gotta put your hands down. You know you gotta put your hands down.
Instead of opposing these acts of aggression, Bridges was permissive and servile towards the demands of the students, allowing them to bully and harass him. Brett Weinstein described the situation as anarchy.
Do you know that the college descended into literal anarchy? It was under the control of protesters. There were assaults, there were batteries, people were kidnapped and imprisoned, others were hunted. Lawless bands roamed the campus unimpeded. Students that held different opinions were, by the protesters' own analysis, stalked, harassed, and doxxed.
And after being forced to resign, was paid a settlement of $500,000 by the college for the way the students had treated him. Needless to say, this has not gone unnoticed in academia by professors who do not subscribe lock, stock, and barrel to social justice. In June 2015, Vox magazine published an article called "I'm a liberal professor and my liberal students terrify me," written by a professor under the pseudonym Edward Schlosser. In the article, Schlosser detailed how he was afraid of the students' overwhelming emotional response to any controversial course material, and that he personally knew many professors who lived with the same fear. He identified the source of the problem as, quote, a simplistic, unworkable, and ultimately stifling conception of social justice. Schlosser argues that feelings have become more important than issues, and that this has been taken advantage of by social justice activists to hijack campuses and create a culture of fear that is silencing anyone who resists political correctness. In September 2015, The Atlantic published an article called The Coddling of the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. In the article, they identified that the social justice movement was attempting to, quote, scrub campuses clean of words, ideas, and subjects that might cause discomfort or give offense. They believe this movement was largely driven by students, which is true, but it is being orchestrated by the network of social justice academics, as identified by Jordan Peterson. The actions of these professors and students seem to be a result of their worldview that justifies breaking the rules to further their political goals, which is what Professor Nathan Rambukkana, one of the faculty members involved in the social justice inquisition against Lindsay Shepherd, outright admitted in his apology letter to her. Quote, maybe we ought to strive to reach across all of our multiple divisions to find points where we can discuss such issues, air multiple perspectives, and embrace the diversity of thought. And maybe I have to get out of an us versus them habit of thought to do this myself, and to think of the goal as more than simply advancing social justice, but social betterment and progress as a whole. The president of Laurea also published an apology on the university's website. It is important to remember that none of this would have been possible if Shepherd had not had the foresight to secretly record the meeting. If you are in a university and you are being reprimanded by what you perceive to be social justice activists for transgressions against social justice or political correctness, you too should protect yourself by secretly recording the meeting and releasing it to the public. It is manifestly observable that the ideology of social justice is a threat to free speech. It's so quantifiable we even have the dollar value. When traditional conservative commentator Ben Shapiro was scheduled to speak at Berkeley in September 2017, the campus was forced to pay $600,000 for security costs to ensure that far-left violence would not cause the event to be shut down. Social justice as a concept has become weaponized for the purposes of a specific kind of politically correct campus activist to erase ideas and the people that present them from college campuses. Its activists wish to create a tightly policed environment in which thought and behaviour are strictly controlled, which is why Lindsay Shepherd was persecuted in a closed meeting with social justice advocates. We find ourselves at a fork in the road. We shall either allow our universities to be tyrannized by a minority of the faculty under the indefinable rubric of social justice and allow students to suppress the human rights of others, or we shall allow them to be free.
Justice is an attribute of individual action. I can be just or unjust towards my fellow man. But the conception of a social justice, to expect from an impersonal process, which nobody can control, to bring about a just result, is not only a meaningless conception, it's completely impossible. See, everybody talks about social justice, but if you press people to explain to you what they mean by social justice, what they would accept as just, nobody knows. I'm telling you because I've been trying for the past 20 years, asking people, what really are your principles of social justice?
Just what white people are. They're fucking aliens. They're fucking parasites.
But let me say this, black people cannot be racist.
They're fucking soulless monsters.
Allosexual is probably the most popular and common of these terms, but it has a few issues. Semantically and sexologically speaking, it doesn't actually contrast asexuality so much as it contrasts autosexuality, which is completely different from asexuality.
Right, well, nobody has to save you because you're a fucking white man who gets to do whatever he wants to in this space, right? Okay. So I'm saying, no, you do not have permission to walk around videotaping women of color and acting like you can do that and the rest of us can't.
All white people are racist, all men are misogynistic, all cisgender people are transphobic,
all members of a majority are biased against the members of the minority.
The Ace and Arrow trilogy will cover some Ace and Arrow relationship terms like queer platonic relationships or QPRs, zucchini, squish, as well as some asexual slang like aces of hearts, spades, clubs, or diamonds, asexy, no romo, and additionally concepts like sex drive or libido, stone, paper, and paper mache, and...
Aren't you quite aware by holding that video camera on me that you are surrounded by your privilege, right? Take your privilege somewhere else, please. All right? Because your privilege is not welcome here. So unless you are here to dismantle your privilege, please find somewhere else to go.
Gray asexuality, which is also known as gray sexuality, gray ace, gray A, and grace, is a sexuality that falls under the asexual umbrella.
So I can be a Chinese woman.
You... Sure.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
Yes.
And you want to know where all this is coming from? You only have to look at the women's studies courses in America alone. This is just the women's studies. This isn't even gender studies. This is the women's studies from America alone, and leading to such great articles as this one in the Dance Journal. Central to this article is the troubling notion of white racial superiority, and specifically the colonizing, prejudicial, and denigrating mentality found in the superiority of whiteness and its embodied behaviors.
Which is what white people are. They're fucking aliens. They're fucking parasites. They're fucking soulless monsters.
Using 2 Pilates exercises, I illuminate how perceived kinesthetic understanding of race in the body may be normalized and privileged. And this was from the PhD of Sarah Holmes. Her dissertation examining issues surrounding race, class, and gender in Pilates. She did a PhD in this. Or this gem, which was funded off a $500,000 NSF grant.
Of giving a little bit more of a concise answer, even if it's just as concise as I support Donald Trump. While asking the left will leave you with blank stares, screechy noises, or if you're particularly unlucky enough to end up talking to the militant wing of the left, Antifa, straight out physical violence and a punch to the face.
All right, come on. Hey, we found this man will talk to us, so why should Trump be impeached?
Because he's lied 1,000 times on record.
What does he lie about?
Should we look it up on his phone?
No, he's recording right now. But you're the one saying impeach the president. Yeah, because you're the one who wants to impeach him.
I mean, I can't impeach him myself.
But you're out here with the impeach Trump crowd.
Yeah, I would love to advance an impeachment agenda.
Well, good to see you again. What are we doing here today?
We are protesting against Trump again.
What for this time?
That's something you would have to ask. Refuse fascism.
Not sure?
Not sure.
Most of these people, they can't name a specific strife they have with the president.
We don't want to fucking hear from you. Get the fuck away from us. We don't want to fucking hear from you. We got nothing to fucking say to you. Get the fuck away from our
Get out of his face.
We don't want anything to do with you. You're a fucking fash. We don't fucking need you here.
Best you guys. This incoherence is important to note as we go forward. 2. That despite this incoherence, there is a massive amount of organization across the supposedly disorganized groups. Antifa members will outright tell you that their groups have no organization, despite the fact that they have websites that they all congregate on. But let's leave that aside for a moment. The Women's March, which chose to feature hack broads, thanks, stealing that from you, Mitch, like Linda Sarsour on stage along with convicted murderers, as apparently they're symbols of exemplary women to look towards, took at least a month to organize, and saw tens of thousands of women in their knitted pussy hats on the National Mall speaking out against...
I don't want your camera in my face.
All right, well, don't you have a message, though?
Your camera out of my face.
Well, why are you protesting then?
You do not have permission.
Why are you protesting?
Actually, I do have permission. Yeah, I don't need permission. You're on public property. You're on public property. But how come you're protesting, but when there's media here to cover your protest, you don't want your message out? Why is that?
Well, again, see point 1. What is more terrifying is that it took less than a week to see the same relative number of people turn out for these same dazed and confused individuals to show up in protest of a free speech rally against individuals with Black Lives Do Matter signs at Boston. This is important because it illustrates that these groups are not only clueless, but they are motivated, and motivated enough to come out en masse over and over again to burn American flags, to decry free speech, which in the next very sentence they will claim to be fighting for along with American values. Clearly, this is a deep-seated motivation to continually draw crowds of the thousands to attack others without cognizant rationale. What I mean by that is they're certainly motivated to come out, but they can't explain why, and that seems to be a little bit of a conundrum. 3. That until very recently
Other side of the wall for you.
To be able to introduce for the first time ever anywhere the 45th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
Adjust the microphone as you told, man. Hands on the lectern.
So you want to be racist. No one said that! Nobody said that! I'm not insulting survivors! I'm not! You guys are insulting survivors by not allowing them to defend themselves. I have a friend who was raped on campus, and she wasn't allowed to have her concealed carry with her, and she was raped because of that. If she would have had her concealed carry, I guarantee she would have been raped. This is what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like! Show me what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like! When you're almost one day. I'm not lost! I'm not lost! 3 times!
Fuck the Eagles! What are you gonna do, bitch? What are you gonna do? Hey, back the fuck up, bro. I'll treat you like a man. Personal property. That's what you want, right? Eagle rights? You go.
I'm filming you.
Oh, I'm gonna hurt you.
Because you have a mask on. Oh, shit.
Oh, you motherfucker. Oh, shit, he's bleeding. Yo. Hey, medic. He's bleeding. Hard. No, he's bleeding bad. He's bleeding bad. He's bleeding bad. Guys, clear.
Hey guys, back up! This now becomes a target!
The ambulance is coming!
This becomes a target! I'd get out of here if I were you!
Woo! What? I don't even know what that was.
Backing out?
You're gonna be okay, bro. Does anyone know what that was?
Oh my god, is he bleeding from his head?
Yeah. Ambulance is already coming, don't worry. They're already on their way.
Certainly wasn't going to hit you with this out of some sort of launcher.
No.
Back up. I was way up there.
God loves you, man. God loves you, don't worry.
Yeah, I know.
Split open the back. I need a pound of gauze.
He's gonna heal you, man. I'm gonna pray for you.
Yeah, don't worry.
Do you guys have any
Even if he doesn't hit me,
Do you have
it's
any
okay.
cling? It's like gauze in a roll.
Yes, I do.
Okay, give me the gauze in a roll.
Well, this is interesting.
Most people were appalled by what happened, but Yvette Falarca is not among those people. Besides working as a public school teacher in California, she is the national organizer for the Coalition to Defend Affirmative Action, Integration, and Immigrant Rights, and Fight for Equality by Any Means Necessary. BAM is the acronym. Falarca is willing to integrate violence into her political agenda, as you can see from this clip of her disrupting a rally last summer in Sacramento.
Off our street! Get the off our street! Get the off our street!
We don't have to give a speech. Here you go, boy. Guys, say we should. Guys, be nice. Come here now.
Off our street! Get the off our street!
Sir,
Vlarka helped organize the Berkeley protests, and she says activists ought to copy his tactics for other speakers and events around the country. Yvette Vlarka is with us now. Yvette, thanks a lot for joining us. So, I mean, that was the response, of course, to the leader of that fascist movement. Most people think it was legitimate. Do you think, you're not answering my question, that people like Milo, who you've decided are fascist, should be allowed to speak in public? You said they weren't allowed to speak at Berkeley.
He should not be allowed
to
to speak in public to spread his racist and misogynistic and homophobic lies. No, he does not have the right to do that.
What about
when he's using his speech to whip up attacks on people? No, he doesn't have the right to do that.
So
and to spread lies about our humanity? No, he doesn't.
Okay, so you're not allowed to say things that you think are untrue. Well, I mean, of course, in the case of Berkeley,
no,
he
that's
was not
what I
committing.
said. I didn't say you're not allowed to say things that are untrue. But if you're trying to spread racism and hostility, misogyny, rape, whip up people to lynch people, or to certainly have that mentality to rape people or to lynch them, absolutely not. And any decent human being, whether it was in a classroom or at a restaurant, if they heard someone doing that, would turn around and tell them, you need to stop talking. You are not welcome here. This is not a safe environment. You need to go. Well, that's what we did at UC Berkeley, and that was a good thing.
Hit them or set fires. So you're a middle school teacher, which may surprise some of our students, or rather some of our viewers, that you have students. The First Amendment was always kind of the cornerstone of American civic life, the idea that you have the right to say something that other people may vehemently disagree with, but you have that right. It's enshrined in the Bill of Rights. Do you teach that to your students? Just so we can understand the standard here, what is a fascist?
So a fascist is someone who's organizing a mass movement that's attacking women, immigrants, black people, other minority groups in a movement of genocide. That's what a fascist is.
Okay. So it's someone who's committing violence?
And it's someone who's committing violence and who's trying to organize other people to commit violence.
Okay.
And Milo Yiannopoulos is a fascist.
Okay. So he's committed acts of violence against the protected groups you mentioned?
Well, what he's doing is he's trying to be the youth face and the token that other people who are organizing violence try to hide behind. And so in all of his talks all over the country, what Yiannopoulos has done is whip up a whole lynch mob mentality where people who come to see him or his supporters not only agree with his views, but also attack other people.
I'm going to show you something that happened recently. Some of you may be aware of this and some of you not. So this is a video about there was a town meeting that a number of people spoke at, including one shopkeeper from New York. And after the meeting, he was interviewed by the press, the TV, and one of the attendees at the meeting was upset about the fact that the press was concentrating on him instead of concentrating on what she regarded as the issues at hand. So I'm going to play this for you to begin with. Now, what I'm trying to show you, I want to show you what it means for someone to be ideologically possessed. And so you can tell when you're talking to someone like that, because this is something I learned from reading Solzhenitsyn, is because you can predict absolutely everything they're going to say. Once you know the algorithmic substructure of their political ideology, which is usually predicated on about 5 or 6 axioms, you can use the axioms to automatically generate speech content. You don't even have to hear the person. You can just predict what they're going to say. And so that alleviates any responsibility whatsoever they have for thinking. And it also allows them to believe that they have full control and full knowledge over the, not only full control and full knowledge about the entire world, but also the capacity to distinguish without a moment's thought between those who are on the side of the good and those who are not. And that's where the danger really comes. So anyways, we'll take a look at this.
So right now, the news is interviewing a person whose daughter was a heroin addict, I think, is what he said in his public comment. And he's pro-bunker, he's pro-cops. And so he's the one getting interviewed, and there are like 1 million people who have spoken about how they've been abused by the cops, that they're not being spoken to. Only the person who's pro-bunker, who's also a person of color. So they got their token, and that's the one that they're using. I have no idea, we'll find out.
I have a question. I'm actually against the bunker. Yes, I
Take my picture.
Yeah.
You want my name?
Yeah, sure.
It's humongous.
Okay. Humongous what? Humongous what?
Humongous.
Humongous what?
Humongous.
Humongous what?
Humongous.
Humongous what?
That's what it is.
Humongous what? Is that sexual harassment?
No, it's humongous.
Then why did you say that to me?
That's my name.
What? Humongous what?
Humongous what?
Humongous what? Is that sexual harassment? Is that what you just did when you said that to me?
What, humongous?
Why would you say that to me?
Yes, but my name.
Why would you say that to me?
Why would I say it to
Why
you?
would you say that to me?
Why would you ask me my name?
What? Humongous what? Humongous what? Humongous what? Humongous what? This person just spoke to me in a sexually harassing way.
I did not.
Yeah, he did. He said, do you know what my name is? And I said, what? And he said, humongous. Yeah, yeah. This person just sexually harassed me.
I said I'm humongous.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Humongous what?
Humongous.
So now you're actually pointing to yourself. You're actually pointing to your body parts, and you're actually pointing to your body parts and saying that you're humongous. You're actually doing that. And this is the person who just got interviewed as a pro-bunker person of color, as if you represent us. They're using you as a token, and then you speak to me in a sexually harassing manner. How dare you? How dare you? Disgusting! Disgusting!
You left them saying your daughter's lives matter, but you
disgusting! You just abused a woman! You just abused a woman, and you have the audacity! You have the audacity to say that girls matter? How dare you? How dare you? You disgusting person! Disgusting! Don't touch me! Don't touch me!
Lower your voice.
Are you going to do anything about how he sexually harassed me? Are you going to do anything about how he sexually harassed me? Are you going to?
I need to go.
Okay, he's asking me to leave. He's asking me to leave after I've been sexually harassed.
I'm just asking.
You're asking me to leave after I've been sexually harassed. Did you ask him to leave? Did you ask him to leave? Did you ask him to? Are you following him? Did you ask him to stop sexually harassing me? What is your name? What is your name? What is your name? What is your name?
Ma'am.
What is your name? You work for the city. We are here in a public place. You need to tell me what your name is.
My name is Tanel.
Yeah.
And I
Tanel
work for a
what?
security firm. I do
Tanel
not work
what?
for a city, okay?
You work for us, so you don't work for us. So that means I don't have to do what you want. You don't work for us. That means I don't have to do what you want.
Stop raising your voice at me.
What is your name?
What is your name? You are breaking our building rules. You're being disorderly.
No, sorry. No, What is your name? What is your name? What is your name?
I've already told you my name.
What is your no, you haven't. What is your full name? What is your full name and what company do you work for? What is your full name?
Universal Protection. My name is Tanel Stefanescu.
Why are you questioning her?
And
I'm just asking.
You are questioning the wrong person.
He just said that he works for a security company, not the city. So I don't have to do what he wants. So fuck off. Who are you? Who are you? Did you go after the person who sexually harassed me? Did you go off? This is Universal Protection Security Service. Notice how they didn't get the cops here. Notice how they didn't get the cops here today. They just got some more cops, basically. So why did you do nothing about the person who sexually harassed me? I made it very clear he just sexually harassed me. Why did you not go up to him and tell him to stop? Why did you not do that?
You want to de-escalate?
Why did you not do that? Why did you not do that?
You deal with a gentleman.
Remember that Drexel professor who wanted white genocide for Christmas? I hate even saying that. Well, he's back, and he's now blaming whiteness for the Texas church shooting. Take a listen.
Whiteness is a structure of privilege, and it's a structure of power, and it's a structure that when it feels threatened, lashes out.
Wow. So is this another sign of chaos on college campuses, and is there anything that we can do about it?
Joining us right now is a psychology professor from the University of Toronto and the author of the upcoming book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, Dr. Jordan Peterson. Doctor, good morning to you. Thanks for making a couch call today.
You bet.
What do you make of this Drexel professor who's been in and out of the news so often, and now he's blaming that for the cause of the shooting in Texas?
I think he's applying his ideological formula to a very complex problem. And it's an easy thing to do. It's this sort of postmodern formula that's taught to university students everywhere now.
What is the formula?
attribute everything to racial disparity and oppression, victimization.
Just everything.
Well, essentially, it's a recasting of Marxism, I would say. And with the Marxist theory, it was rich against poor, bourgeoisie against proletariat. And that was recast in the 1970s as oppression due to group identity, essentially. And so that's where identity politics came from. It's a formula you can learn in about a day, and then you can use it to explain everything.
College is designed to teach you to think about the world and prepare you for the world outside of college. How is this helping that, and what kind of students are we getting when they're 22, 23, whenever they graduate?
You have the tense wrong. College was that.
Understood.
So, and I don't think it is that in many cases now, especially in the liberal arts, and that's a real catastrophe.
Much different than my experience 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, things have changed dramatically in the last 5 years, I would say. And we saw this rise of political correctness in the 1990s. It burst forward in between 1990 and about 1993. And then it seemed to subside a little bit, but it's back with an absolute vengeance now. And we know that most of the university campuses, in the liberal arts anyways, are heavily dominated by leftist thinking, and radical leftist thinking for that matter.
Well, what happened, Doctor, in the early 90s to spawn this?
Well, I think it's popped up more or less repeatedly since the late 1960s. I'm not sure exactly why.
Started with the anti-war movement?
Yeah, with the anti-war movement, but there was a fair bit of radical thinking in the 1960s on the left side, and many of those people ended up teaching in universities. And so, and with the rise of postmodernism, that's a huge factor. That was a French intellectual school that was a transformation of Marxism into identity politics, essentially. And because I think, in some sense, because it requires almost no intellectual effort and leaves you with an overwhelming sense of moral superiority, it's very attractive to people. They're basically teaching young people, I would say, to be ideological avatars, to go act out this pernicious doctrine in the real world.
Some of them were doing that. They were howling at the moon. They were screaming in the night. They were upset at the year anniversary a few days ago of President Trump being elected. What do you make of that?
Well, I think a lot of that is a kind of narcissism. You know, I mean, that sort of public display. It's probably amplified to a great degree by social media and media in general, right? Because this sort of highly emotional display does make a reasonable news clip. But
what's the danger here?
Well, the danger is everywhere at the moment. The danger is increased polarization. We're seeing that nonstop at the moment, and I think it's mostly because the people on the radical left are pushing way too hard. That's my estimate. You see that in Canada as well as the United States and all around the Western world.
I want to ask you this because I live in a very Democratic state, Connecticut, right?
Yep.
None of my friends would ever operate like this. Now, granted, my friends are older. They find this reprehensible. So I mean, it seems like a lot of Democrats are fired up about this idiocy.
Oh, yeah. Well, lots of people who were in what you might describe as the liberal center are very unhappy that the political landscape on the left side has shifted way over to the radical leftist side. That's a very common sentiment now. And I think it's happening faster than people really understand. So it's almost impossible to overstate how influential these postmodern doctrines have become and how they're seeping in now into corporations, mostly through HR departments.
I read an article, and it was about Barbara Corcoran, and she was talking about people she hires and doesn't hire. And when she's investing in companies like we see on Shark Tank, she says if you're a victim, she hates the word victim and people who have that victimized mentality, where they are the victim, woe is me. Do you see that more and more? Is that like a millennial thing, or is it...
Well, it's a form of justification for the use of power. You know, if you're a victim and you can ascribe moral superiority to yourself, then you're justified in the use of force. And I did a paper with a student of mine who toured the mass graves in Eastern Europe and Yugoslavia with the UN, and we looked at the precursors to genocide, and one of them was an enhanced sense of victimization. That allows you to lash out at the hypothetical perpetrators before they do anything, because you're being victimized. You saw the same thing to some degree in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, Hitler. Hitler felt very victimized.
Yeah, Hitler claimed that the Jews were victimizing Germany, essentially. And so once you're a victim and you have all the moral status that goes along with being a victim, then you can't do any wrong, essentially.
All
so.
Right. Interesting discussion. Dr. Jordan Peterson's new book is called 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos, which we certainly need now. Doctor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for the invitation.
Thank you.
Tame problems are definable, understandable, and consensual. The experts agree on what the problem is, and we have clear metrics so we know when we've solved it. Wicked problems are things like poverty, or racism, or global warming. With wicked problems, the experts themselves are shaped by their moral and political values. They bring those in just to frame the problem, and this is why they don't converge. This is why they don't agree. I recently read this really fantastic article by Ted Nordhaus and Michael Schellenberger on the amazingly wicked problem we're having in America right now with increasing political polarization and paralysis. So they wrote this wonderful article applying Riddle and Weber to the current state of what's happening in America. And speaking with the general theory, they say, experts could only define wicked problems in relationship to background solutions, which are themselves shaped by underlying values and a vision of the good society. As a result, disagreements over social and environmental policy cannot be resolved by experts, who in many ways make the problem more intractable. So think about it like this. For tame problems, it's easy to get the facts. I mean, there might be some technical challenges, but once you've got the right tools, those tools work the same for everyone, regardless of your politics. You look through the microscope, you see the bacterium. It doesn't matter whether you're on the left or the right. But when you're doing social policy work, the tools, it's like Alice playing croquet with a live flamingo and a live hedgehog. The tools are always moving around, except that for policy work, the tools are a lot more cooperative than that flamingo because the tools kind of help you to reach the conclusion that you want to reach. Now, I don't want to overstate things. Economists do reach consensus. They do reach agreement on many difficult issues. But the fact remains that for almost any policy dispute, for almost any debate we have in our society, you can find some experts who will back you up. And the reason is because within every society, on the left and the right, people have different visions of what democratic capitalism should look like. And to understand those visions, you have to understand the stories that people are telling about capitalism. Now, I'm a social psychologist, and I've studied morality for 27 years. And one thing that I've learned that I'm pretty confident about is that you can't really convince people on moral and political issues by giving them facts. And the reason is because human reasoning does not take place in a logical world based on facts. It takes place in an emotional world based on stories. And we don't even write these stories. We imbibe them, we drink them in as we grow up. We may not even be able to tell them ourselves, but when we see something, we hear something that fits with our favorite stories, we get a feeling of familiarity, and that tags it as true. So since the global financial crisis, I've been listening to the stories told by left and right about capitalism, and there are two main variants. It's so helpful to have names for these stories. It's so helpful to make them visible. And my hope is that if everybody has names for them and we can see them and maybe even laugh at them, we can make our problems a little bit less wicked. So what I did was, to prepare for coming here, I figured, okay, I can't just give a standard academic talk, but better make it a little more fun, more compelling. So I hired a video company to animate. I wrote out the stories, and I hired a video company to animate the two stories. So here they are.
Once upon a time, work was real and authentic. Farmers raised crops, and craftsmen made goods with their own hands. But then, capitalism was invented, and darkness spread across the land as the smokestacks of the Industrial Revolution covered everything in soot. The capitalists became ever more skilled at extracting productivity from workers and pocketing the gains from their labor. The workers eventually fought back by unionizing. In the early 20th century, as the brutality and stupidity of capitalism were exposed, many governments granted workers some protection from the predators. Democratic welfare states were born. But the capitalists and their right-wing cronies were unrelenting, and in many countries, they have destroyed the unions slashed regulations, and given the corporations free rein to exploit at will. So, the rich get richer, the rest of us get poorer, our democracy gets weaker, and the planet gets hotter. It is now the duty of every decent person to join the fight against global capitalism and the super predators it has unleashed upon us.
So what do you think? Does that feel true? Does it feel familiar and true, or does it feel strange and vaguely irritating to you? Here's the second story.
Once upon a time, almost everyone was a peasant, a serf, or a slave. Kings and feudal lords took most of what people produced, so nobody had much reason to work hard. But then, in the 17th century, capitalism was invented and the liberation began. In England, Holland, and America, they discovered that when you give people property rights, the rule of law, and free markets, you turn on a switch in their hearts. People want to work when they can keep the fruits of their labor. They want to invent new products, provide for their children, and be useful to others. Free market capitalism enables them to do these things. In the 20th century, some countries embraced communism and centralized planning, always with the same result: shortages of everything, including food and freedom. But countries that embraced capitalism have grown prosperous in a single generation. Yet, despite the evidence of history, the left-wing egalitarians are unrelenting, and whenever they get control of a government, their first target is economic freedom. The egalitarians don't want to live in a world in which people who create more value for others get to enjoy more wealth for themselves. They'd rather that everyone be equal and equally poor. It is now the duty of every decent person to join the fight to protect capitalism and to extend its blessings to all of humankind.
Okay. So I guess in Zurich, is that second story more popular? Is this a very capitalist city? So these stories resonate or they don't resonate, but they shape the mental space within which we do our thinking, because what we believe drives what we perceive. So here's a very simple demonstration. What do you see here? Do you see a triangle sitting on top of three circles, or do you see three partially eaten pizzas? Okay. This effect is so compelling because most people can make out the edges. Can you see the slight edges of the triangle even between the circles? Nod your head if you can see those edges a little bit. Okay, now watch. I'm going to make them go away just by covering up two of the circles because they're not really there. Your brain is guessing that the most likely thing out in the world that would cause that is a triangle on three circles. And so then your brain tries to confirm the guess that it just made. And we're usually pretty good at confirming our guesses as long as there's any ambiguity. Again, what we believe drives what we perceive. This is the basic idea behind the Rorschach test. The idea was if you give people an ambiguous figure, all their unconscious stuff is going to project out onto this ambiguous figure. That was the idea. Now, it turns out the Rorschach test doesn't really tell you much about the unconscious, but I made a better Rorschach test. Ready? What do you think? Is that the world's greatest economist who wrote the world's most important book, or is it just another left-wing it's just another left-wing academic justifying high taxes on the rich? If you read the reviews of Piketty's book, well, if you know the politics of the reviewer, you kind of know what the review is going to say. So again, what we believe drives what we perceive. So I had a lot of sympathy for that, and I was teaching a business ethics course, and we'd go through case after case of businesses doing all these terrible things and pressing their employees to do all these terrible things, and most of them were legal. So, you know, I'm immersed in all of this negative stuff about business, and I see that there's some truth to story one. But at the same time, everyone around me in the business school is talking about creating value, creating value. It's all about creating value. And at first, you know, business has a lot of buzzwords, and I'm, you know, creating value. So, you know, I sort of write it off as, you know. But then, as I start reading about the history of capitalism, and I start reading Adam Smith, and then I see this graph. And this just changed me forever. This is the most amazing graph I have ever seen. So let me explain this to you. This is a graph of GDP per capita in constant $1990, graphing it out from the year 1 on the far left all the way through 1950 by the different regions of the world. So what you see here is that everybody in the world was living on about $400 a year. That's a little over $1 a day. Just about everybody is living at starvation wage, its level of starvation, for thousands of years. And you can see Western Europe bumps up just a little bit after 1500 because you get mercantile capitalism, you're moving stuff around, so Europe gets a little wealthier. But it's not until you get the Industrial Revolution, it's not until you get industrial capitalism, which makes stuff, huge amounts of stuff cheaply, it's not until then that you get things really taking off. The West skyrockets, especially America. And if that transition, if that transformation in just 150 years doesn't blow you away, look what happened in the next 50 years. Okay? And that data only goes up to the year 2000. Since 2000, the West has slowed down. It's still growing, but it's slowed down, whereas the rest of the world's catching up. So when you really see this, when you appreciate this, when you see what happens, you realize that creating value isn't just a buzzword. It's actually a moral imperative. Because when you get this process going in previously poor countries, this is what happens to poverty. So in 1820, it's estimated that about 95% of the people on this planet were living on around $1.25 a day of current value. And by 2010, it's down to 21%. And it's still dropping rapidly. Can you imagine that? Poverty has gone from being the state of almost everybody to being, it will soon be the state of very few people. This is arguably the most important event in human history. But because it was spread out over 200 years, a lot of people seem to have missed it. So let's take, for example, this fellow. He's a famous actor and economist, Russell Brand. And he recently wrote this book in which he argues that our system, capitalism, is designed to behave like this. It generated wealth for the wealthy and further impoverishes those with nothing. Asking it to behave differently is like asking a microwave to wash your car. But this is just completely wrong. I think there's really no alternative but to starting with a liberation story. But you can't stop there because every story clues you into certain facts, but it blinds you to others. So the way I see it, capitalism is liberation, but the way it liberates is by unlocking the incredible innovative spirit of humanity. And part of that innovation is ever new forms of exploitation. I mean, people get really clever, like this guy here. You got to hand it to this guy for having the foresight for buying the domain name Ebola.com and then selling it back when the disease hit. But what concerns me isn't sleazebags who hang out on the edges of otherwise decent markets. What concerns me is that there's been a shift in thinking about business, certainly in America, and I think it's spreading elsewhere. Business is about competition, but it's a lot more about cooperation. There's a lot more cooperation than competition. Stakeholder theory is the view